remember I spent 6 years in the Navy and was a Special Forces Navy SEAL.
Right.
I can't fairly, and I don't mean for this to be political, but I think that I enjoy all of my careers somewhat equally because as my career changed, life changed for me. And so each career at the time they happened were as important as the career I left. I just like to reinvent myself. I don't want to get to say 75 years old, if I'm fortunate enough to be here that long, and look back and say woulda, coulda, shoulda. I want to be able to say, yep, I did everything I wanted to do, because I haven't fully embraced the concept of reincarnation yet. So I kind of look at it as you only get one turn down here, so you better do everything that you can imagine to do.
I'm going to ask you a question as someone who grew up in Britain, and wrestling, professional wrestling, was totally different there. A lot of people outside the US always see the wrestling here as almost like a circus, as a show.
Sure, it is a show. Yeah, it's entertainment. You know, there's no doubt about it. I mean, we have great amateur wrestlers, you know, that go to the Olympics and all that. But professional wrestling is entertainment.
So is there no sportsmanship, skill?
There's phenomenal skill. I love to describe professional wrestling as ballet with violence. You know, because the athletes are as good as any great ballet, Nureyev or all that, because they have to be great athletes, you know, to do ballet. And it's the same in pro wrestling. And how I got into that was I always was an athlete. And then when I got out of the military, I went to junior college for 1 year. And I was on the GI Bill, so I could take anything I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I got very involved and enjoyed theater.
Right.
And I thought, wow, physical and theater, this combined both.
I'm going to go through your family history in a minute, but I want to ask you a little bit about that, just a little bit about how wrestling and sports in general now has become so much about big money, big ticket stuff. Yeah. I mean, has that taken away a lot from it?
No, because it always has been. It's just that as time goes, the money gets bigger. You know, well, I set the stage for the wrestlers who make the money today. In baseball, I remember in Minnesota when people were aghast when Harmon Killebrew, the great Hall of Famer, got a contract for $100,000 a year, 6 figures. Well, today you got guys making that in one game almost. You know, but that's the nature of it. And so it's always been about money. But, you know, it is a business. Once you accept money to do something, it then becomes a business. So it really isn't sport. It's a business.
I want to take you back now. You were born James Jonas in Minnesota.
Janos.
Janos would be, I guess. I was going to get on the Slovak origin from your father's side. Now, you were born just a little after the World War. You know, in the Second World War, your parents were, you know, hardworking people there in Minnesota.
Well, they were also both World War II veterans.
That's right. I was going to ask you about that.
Not many people can say that their mother is a World War II veteran. I can. She's buried in a federal cemetery right now, along with my father. But no, they were both World War II veterans, and my brother and I are both Vietnam veterans.
And I was going to ask you how much that Second World War, the stories of it and the time, the conflict, featured into your early childhood and the stories you heard.
It didn't, because my parents didn't talk much about the war. I think you'll find most veterans don't talk about what they were involved in, for whatever reason it may be. I didn't learn many things. My father never drove a car. And when I inquired as a young child why, you know, my mom drove. That was strange in a family where the mother drove and the father didn't. And my dad always just used to shrug it off and say, I don't trust myself with a car. And I accepted that. I thought, well, if you don't trust yourself to drive, it's probably a good idea that you don't. Well, when my father passed away, my mom then told me the real reason. My father was involved, his unit was the tank destroyers, which you drive, and apparently he had a few situations where he had to drive over masses of dead bodies. And apparently, you know, it probably gave him flashbacks or whatever else it could be, and that's why he chose not to ever drive. But again, I didn't learn that until my father was gone.
Well, your father George, you know, he had the Slovak side on his on his side, and your mother had Bernice had German
history
as well.
Her maiden name was Lenz, and she was from Germany, or her family was from Germany, way up, she said, by the Polish border. So in that part of Germany.
What do you think was the biggest lesson you learned from them?
The biggest lesson I've learned is that they've been gone now for almost 20 years, both of them, and they get smarter every day. Because the things that they told me back then, as I get older, They get smarter every day of what they told me, and it's amazing to say that after they've both been gone, but I think that may be the case for many, many people out there that they don't realize that.
Fantastic way to look at it, fantastic. Let me ask you, was it a happy childhood?
Absolutely. My parents were middle class, hardworking. I was a latchkey kid. You know, so people that say, oh, kids can't survive, they need all this supervision and all that baloney. My folks in the mornings were already gone to work. I had to get myself to school in the morning. Now, granted, when I was little, they hired the neighbor lady across the street, and then I'd come home for lunch. I would go to her house and eat lunch and then back to school. But the good part about being a latchkey kid is that I would get home from school before my parents would get home. So if I changed clothes quick and got out of there, I could go back to the playground till dinner and be, I was then gone. And all they cared was that I changed my school clothes into the play clothes. I remember that. As long as I did that, I was good to go till 6 o'clock when dinner was served.
You were a sportsman from an early age. Did you take to sports naturally? Did it come?
Yeah, I'm an athlete, and my brother was an athlete, like all younger brothers. For about 18 years, you follow in your older brother's footsteps. Whatever he was a swimmer, I became a swimmer. He went in the Navy, I went in the Navy. And so you follow your brother. I think little brothers do to a certain stage in life before they then branch off and become their own person.
It was 1969, you graduated from school and you went straight into the US Navy.
Yeah.
And pretty much straight into the Vietnam War.
Well, no, I spent over 1 year in training. Because when you're going to be a Navy SEAL, you're the best. And so I went to boot camp naturally. Then I went to A school, where you have to have a rate, storekeeper A school. And then I went to what they called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, which is 5 months long. I then went to Army Airborne Jump School, completed that. I went to SEER School, Survival, Escape, Resistance, Evasion. By the way, that's where I was waterboarded. So I know what waterboarding is, and I can unequivocally tell you it is torture. No two ways about it. It is torture. Let me be clear on that. It's torture. And then I went to what they call SBI or SEAL Cadre, which is where you really get into it. 7 weeks in the deserts of Niland, California, where all you do is run ops every day. You shoot every weapon the U.S. military has, and you literally live with your platoon. So you're well prepared. And then I graduated from there on Wednesday, and they said, be at Naval Air Station North Island Monday morning. You deploy to Southeast Asia. And off I went. I had 2 deployments, 9 months and 8 months.
And what was that experience like in terms of how it changed you?
Well, it matured you, certainly, and I'll tell you what the most traumatic thing was for me. I don't discuss my military career because when we came back, we were brought into the briefing room, and my commanding officer said, you'll talk about nothing you did or nothing you saw. And I still abide by that order. I just tell people I served honorably for 6 years, and I did what my country asked me to do. The most traumatic, believe it or not, was my first return to the United States. Because I had been overseas 9 months, and I came back to my own country, and I wasn't an adult. I couldn't vote yet, because at that time, voting was 21 years old. Then they moved it to 18. And I couldn't drink. I couldn't even have a beer. And I was back for 5 days, and I went into my executive officer, and I said, I want to go back overseas. And he looked at me and said, but you just got back 5 days ago. Why? I said, because over there I'm an adult, here I'm a child. I can't even walk up on Orange Avenue in Coronado and have a cold beer in the afternoon because I'm not old enough. And how I read that, then what that said to me was one of 2 things. Since I wasn't, and I believe any young man or woman, if they serve their country in the military, should be given every privilege as an adult. How can you not be one? And it told me we send children to war. Isn't that child abuse? I mean, if I'm not an adult in my own country, then I'm a child. And they're going to send me to war, a child to war?
In 1975, you were honorably discharged from the U.S. Navy, and you settled in the San Diego Bay Area.
Just shortly, for a period of time.
Yeah. I gather you joined a motorbike club. Was that
I actually started doing that before I got out of the Navy. I used to leave the base and put, quote, my colors on. And they kind of knew I wasn't going to stay in, so they kind of overlooked it. I didn't wear them on the base. So, again, it was just a rebellious transition period. You know, I was going to, and again, it goes back to what I told you, woulda, shoulda, coulda. You know, we all hear what it's like, or hear what outlaw motorcycle clubs, as they like to refer to them, are, which they are. And so I thought, well, let's try this for a little while. And so I did, you know, and I don't shy from it, you know. It's a part of life, and you know, I enjoyed it when I did it. But I realized that there were other things I wanted to do rather than just strictly get caught in that niche. I'm still in good standing with them. I'm just considered retired, and have been for over 25 years.
I gather you were, for a while, you were a bodyguard for the Rolling Stones too.
Well, I bodyguarded all the rock bands. The way that worked out was, you've done your homework.
I tried.
I had some minor knee surgery, and so a friend of mine was involved. He said, hey, for $25, you want to bodyguard the rock bands, and you get to sit right next and listen to the shows. And I've always been a rock and roll fan. I thought, why not? So, you know, I did the Rolling Stones, I did Bruce Springsteen, I did Foreigner, Grateful Dead, Marshall Tucker Band. I can't even remember all of them that we handled through the course of that summer.
1975 was also the year you married your the love of your life, the woman you built a life and family with, Terry.
Yeah.
Back then, how would she have described you?
She said, she described me, the reason she said she married me, because I was the first guy she met that was focused and knew what he wanted to do. And she felt, I want to go on the ride with this guy. This is a guy that she thought was going to take her on a very interesting life. And I hope that I fulfilled that to her, and I think I have.
It was an interesting time for you. You tried to go back to college after you'd served in the U.S. Navy, and you dropped out after a year. And then
that was just junior college. It wasn't even big college. It was junior college.
But you found that passion, the theatre and sports as well. And that's where you were spotted by a wrestling promoter who sort of created, or helped you create, the Jesse the Body Ventura.
Right.
And just tell me, the Ventura name also came from looking at some maps of beaches.
Well, what it was I was in a fortunate position in those days in wrestling. There was good and evil. It was the constant battle of good versus evil. And I, of course, wanted to be evil because you can be more creative being evil. You know, good is mom, apple pie, and the girl back home. You can't be creative. Evil, you can act, if you want to call that. And so I got to name myself, and not many people get that opportunity to name themselves, and I always loved the name Jesse. And I wanted to be a surfer from California, bleach blonde hair and all that, because for some reason, long blonde hair on a man angers people. I don't know why, but it does. And so I started matching Jesse up with, I pulled out a map of California, and when I saw Jesse Ventura, boom, the light went. I said, I'm going to be Jesse Ventura.
What do you think you learned from that time in wrestling?
Well, you travel America. One of the goals I had was to physically set foot in all 50 states, and I accomplished that years ago. I have physically been in every state in the United States of America between my Navy career and my pro wrestling career.
Amazing. Now, the story is that in 1991, you were living in the Brooklyn Park area of Minnesota, and
1990, actually.
It was 1990. Well, you were actually a little disillusioned with how ineffective the government was there. Is that what prompted your?
Yeah. We were a very old neighborhood in this suburban city, and they tried to force something onto our neighborhood that was unneeded. No one had a problem with it. Well, the old cliche, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And 450 of us in the neighborhood signed a petition and took it up to City Hall, and we were voted down 7-0. Now, I might have accepted 4-3 or 5-2, but when it was a slam dunk 7-0, I said, what's going on here? Aren't they supposed to be working for us? It doesn't seem that's the case here. And I got more involved, and one day the 25-year incumbent mayor, I was at the podium and I was angry, and I looked at him and said, you're going to make me run against you, aren't you? And his buddy on the city council burst out laughing and said, you couldn't win. Well, I got news for you. You don't tell a Navy SEAL can't. You don't tell us we can't do anything. So I knew when I walked out that night, I was going to run for mayor of Brooklyn Park. I did. I ended up beating the 25-year incumbent 67% to 33%, which in any terms in an election is a huge landslide. I mean, they call a landslide winning by 10%. I won by 2-1.
Now, of course, in 1997, you ran for governor of Minnesota, and on a very sort of unusual and mixed platform. Pro-gay rights, pro-choice, pro-gun, and then of course you came from that wrestling background as well. And I wonder, you know, you were very much thought of as a very straight-talking and down-to-earth guy, and got elected, of course, the 30th governor. In terms of what you were able to do, how much it really empowered you, was it what you expected?
Well, I was able to be very successful till my last year because, fortunately, I had a Republican-controlled House and a Democratically controlled Senate. So generally, whichever one I sided with prevailed, because I'm the third entity as governor. But then the last year, they teamed up against me. Can you imagine that? The Democrats and Republicans getting in bed together to oppose the moderate, centrist, middle-of-the-road governor. See, when you talked about how unusual my positions are, I don't believe they're unusual. I believe they're the average position of an American citizen. I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm socially liberal. I don't care if gay people get married. How does that affect me and my wife's marriage?
Now, the year 2000, around the year 2000, I think you were starting to get disillusioned with politics. In 2002, you decided not to run for re-election.
No, it wasn't disillusion of politics. If you read my book, Don't Start the Revolution Without Me, I said why I didn't seek a second term. I kept it quiet. It was my wife's health. And she got what they call chronic fatigue syndrome, which can be accelerated with stress. It becomes worse and worse. And it was very stressful for her when the media attacked our children. Yeah. And as a mother, there's not a worse thing in the world that can happen to a mother, especially to have her children attacked. And see, they couldn't get me on anything else, the press. So they had to come after me by going after my kids. And I thought, how despicable. I'll tell you this, had I not been married, I'd probably still be the governor there. Because always remember us Navy SEALs, we live by a simple rule. We don't get mad, we get even.
I'll be careful what I say to you. Now, you did take up some acting, and it was a passion for you to do theatre, of course. You did some movie roles. You were in Batman in 1997, Batman and Robin with George Clooney, and of course 1986 Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger as well. Did you enjoy that time in the film industry?
Love it. And I do films today. If I get an offer today, I'm a vested member of the Screen Actors Guild. That's where I get my retirement, my health benefits from them.
Jesse, who are your mentors? Who are the people who inspired you and sort of were examples to you in life?
Muhammad Ali, which I remember him as Cassius Clay.
Yeah.
And no, he was my hero growing up as a young kid. I was fortunate enough to meet Muhammad when I became governor. In fact, when I won that night, I got up on the thing and I told the story of how, because I remember listening to the fight on the radio with my dad and my brother, because back then they weren't on TV. You listened on the radio to the World Championship when he beat Sonny Liston. And before the fight, I was the only one saying, Cassius is going to win, Cassius is going to win, and he did. And I remember that Muhammad said that night, we shocked the world. So when I won governor, I stood up and told that story, and I said, we shocked the world like Muhammad Ali did when he beat Sonny Liston. Lo and behold, I was in the bowels of the Capitol during transition, and a package arrived for me, delivered by my good friend Harvey McKay, a businessman. And he said, open it. And there was a box. I opened it, and there were 2 boxing gloves in there. And written on them was, to Governor Jesse Ventura, you shocked the world, Muhammad Ali. Apparently Muhammad was watching that night.
Fantastic.
And then I got to go meet him. And it's a day in my life I will never forget. And even though, he's disabled with the Parkinson's, the twinkle's still in the eye. And you know what I found interesting going into Muhammad's house? On the shelf above his fireplace, of equal stature, was the Quran side by side with the Bible. Both of them on his shelf. And I took notice of that. And I thought, how interesting that here he has the Quran side by side with the Bible. Why can't the rest of the world do that? Why can't they?
And of course, you've become a very high-profile critic and commentator on American politics and keeping an eye on what's going on in the USA. And I wonder, and you talk a lot about it in your 2008 book, Don't Start the Revolution Without Me. To what degree do you feel you can really create change? I mean, is the system too big and heavy to overturn?
No. I tell everyone right now, they say, how can we save our country? I tell them all, it's as simple as the nose on your face. But the old cliche, you can't see the forest for the trees. You know how we can do it? Simply stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. Vote for anyone else. John Adams warned us, one of our forefathers. He said the downfall of the United States would not come from an outside entity. It would come from within. He said this way back in the 1700s. He said it would come when political parties take over the government. Political parties have taken over our government. They put their party first. They put their corporate money donors second. And we, the people, may be third.
You keep incredibly busy, and I wonder, do you find time for quiet moments?
Absolutely. That's why I live in Mexico for at least 4 months out of the year. I live so remotely down there, I can go walk on the beach someday for 2 miles and see not another human. It's down there. I don't watch TV. I read books. In one winter down there, I'll read 17 books. That's probably more books I read in my entire formal education. And so I enjoy reading. My perfect day down there, other than, getting out in the water and attempting to become a surfer, is to lay in a hammock with a bottle of Italian sparkling mineral water and a book.
Is there anything outstanding on your list of things to do that's waiting to be done?
I don't know if I'm waiting for it, but everyone in the country seems to want me to be the president.
Is it a possibility you'd try it?
When you hold those jobs, it's truly an oxymoron. You may stand for freedom, but you yourself have none. That job is jail.
Right.
You can't go anywhere. You have no privacy. I mean, if you want to go to the 7-Eleven store and get a root beer, they got to weld manhole covers shut so you can go there. So that's the difficult decision for me. Would I want to take that much of my life and basically get sent to jail? Although it's a nice jail. You get this huge white house to live in. But you're still, to me, in a way, I love my freedom. I love now, down in Mexico, I love the fact that rarely do I get recognized. They just view me as a big gringo who can't speak Spanish. I have to pantomime, I have to use a word or two, but the people down there are marvelous. All they care is that you try.
Jesse, how would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
What would I like my legacy to be? That he was bold, brash, that he spoke the truth, and that he lived life the way he wanted to live. And also there's one other thing that I'm now working very hard on so that I can put it on my gravestone. Because I believe that hopefully if I'm fortunate enough to live long enough, I don't think anyone else in the world will be able to say it. You know what that is? He never owned a cell phone. I have never owned one, and now it's become my life's mission. I will never own a cell phone.
More power to you, Jesse Ventura. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.